like so much scope there for like you think you're doing the right thing and then it turns out you're actually doing exactly the wrong thing. Also, I just really feel like I need to point out Katy is like the sweetest, loveliest, kindest person. And if you've been around me, I tend to be a little bit bubbly too. And we're here with the dark descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein, and I darken and there will come a darkness. So like, just goes to show. Just write what's in your heart. And in our case, I guess our hearts have a lot of darkness. Okay, so I am really curious because when you set out to write a book, one of the very first decisions you have to make is point of view and tense. And you can go back and forth on those forever. Like, is it going to be first person? Is it going to be third person? Who is telling this story? Who has the most to lose? They should be the point of view character. Sometimes I'm like, oh, it should be this person. I try and write a few chapters and I'm like, oh, there are no stakes for them. It should actually be this other person. Sometimes you think you know who's going to be in a book and then you realize, like, in this later sequel, there's another point of view that I didn't originally plan on having there, but then it turned out the book really needed it. You have 5 points of view, which strikes me as like wildly ambitious, but I feel like for our first book, is it just kind of you didn't know what you were getting into, or did you know and you always knew that it had to be structured that way? Like, how did you go about deciding to write a book with 5 points of view?
Yeah, I absolutely did not know what I was getting myself into.
Okay.
100%.
Okay, yeah.
Gonna be real honest with you guys. I was like, this is gonna be great. I love books with multiple points of view. Like, that's just, I love to see a story from different perspectives, to like really know a character, but then see them through another character's eyes. So I love that. And I was like, this is great. I'm just going to write these. Originally, it was 4 points of view. And I was like, I'm going to write these 4 points of view. And they all have kind of their own stuff going on, their own problems. And so I started writing the book. And I was like, oh, this is really hard. I don't really know. Like,
I feel like that's the beginning of every author's journey. I started writing the book and then I was like, oh, this is really hard.
It's hard. It was hard. So I was like, but at no point was I like, I'm gonna like cut out some of the points of view. I was like, nope, this is the story I'm telling. I just need to figure out a way. I like sort of knew how their stories intersected, but I didn't really know the sort of overarching thing that brought all of these storylines together. And so that was sort of like a process of figuring that out.
Wait, whose point of view did you add?
So I started with Afira, Anton, Hassan, and Jude. And Beru, who is Afira's sister, didn't originally have a point of view. I was about halfway through the draft, and I was like, oh, I need her point of view. Like, it needs to happen. And I wrote this one chapter from her point of view that I just loved. And I was like, all right, this is happening. Like, she's in the book now. So her point of view is now earlier in the book as well. Like, you get to see her point of view in, I think, like 6 or 7, chapter 6 or 7. So then it ended up being 5, and I was like, this is fine, this is great. It's gonna work out. And it took a really long time to revise the book, I think, because of the multiple points of view.
Well, it makes it so intricate how everything fits together, but if you have to shift one thing, then it's like this cascading effect.
Absolutely, yeah. And it was like balancing like what information we get from what person's point of view, like the moments when the characters meet, like whose point of view is that in. So it was a lot of balancing of that, and like 100% didn't think it was going to be that hard when I started, and was like, no, I see why people don't do this frequently.
Anytime you lock yourself into a specific structure, like I found that with the Anti-Darkened books, because it's dual point of view, it's told from a brother or sister's point of view, and I would get to an event that needed to happen, and I had always thought it would happen from like Lana's point of view, but it would be a Radu chapter, and so I'd have to figure out, can I tell this in a way that's just as important from his point of view, or do I need to vastly restructure this entire section?
Well, because you sort of had decided that they were going to be alternating. And this is not exactly alternating. Like, it doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah,
like,
I tend to lock myself into really rigid structures.
Yeah, I didn't do that quite with this book, so I was able to sort of shift into whoever's point of view made the most sense for what was happening next. But I did still try to keep things somewhat equal. There are people who have more chapters than others. But then in the sequel, you know, that sort of flips, and we get to see a little bit more of the people who we have fewer chapters of in the first book. So.
Yeah, I remember that. I was like, that was a lot.